Hey guys, Pelican here. Welcome to my 1-bar Magplar solo PvP build for the Untitled Chapter. This patch has been extremely rough for solo PvP. Everyone does so much damage now. Lots of new broken builds out there. And this build is no different. It does a lot of damage, even though it's just 1 bar. But survivability is going to be a huge concern for us. And it's one of the hardest things I have to work against when making this build. But so far, I think I found a build that works pretty well, all things considered, and I'll be sharing it with you guys in this video. Timestamps are in the description, and without further ado, let's get into the video. So before I go through the build, here's the full setup. Feel free to screenshot if you need to. And as usual, I will start by going through the sets. I'm running 2-piece Balrog, 1-piece Trainee, 5-piece Rallying Cry, 3-piece Willpower, and of course I'm running Oakensoul, which is the whole point of this build. So let's go through the sets first. Firstly, I'll go through Oakensoul. I mean, this is just such an overpowered pay-to-win set. It forces you into 1 bar, but while on it you have like a crap ton of buffs, and on this setup we will be utilizing pretty much all of them. So we have Major Courage, Major Berserk, Major Sock, Major Prophecy. All these are damage effects, and we'll be utilizing all of them. We have Major Force, Major Protection, Major Resolve. And even Major Resolve will be utilizing it since we are not running any armor skills. And then we have all the minor regens, which we'll also be using. And obviously we have Major Heroism, which is probably, I would say, the strongest aspect of this set. I mean, you're just going to have a lot of ouch regen. So that's just a overview of what Oakensoul gives you. It's very stat dense. I would say this is like at least 4-5-piece sets all into one piece. So for my monster, I'm running Balrog. I think this is I think you either need Balrog or Mechanical Acuity to deal like enough damage on this build. I decided to go with Balrog because I think it just synergizes really well with the Major Heroism. And on top of that, my build doesn't have a lot of like pen itself. I'm only sitting at 5.4k. Definitely not enough to kill most people. So Balrog is a really good set in my opinion for this. You could also go Magma Incarnate, but I mean, you'll be tankier and I guess more consistent damage. But even that can be argued because with Major Heroism, you're just going to be using outs a lot, so you're going to have a very high Balrog uptime. So definitely going with this set. For my 5-piece, I'm running Rallying Cry, and yeah, this patch, as I said earlier, is survivability is going to be a very big issue. So I think I definitely need at least Rallying Cry. I mean, it's a very stat dense set, gives you 300 spell damage and also 1.6k crit resist. And I think this is going to be very useful this patch because I'm sure a lot of other people are going to run Oakensoul and have a lot of crit damage. So I think you definitely need like at least either Rallying Cry or some other 5-piece defense set. And I chose to go with Rallying Cry. It also gives you a pretty decent amount of crit, which is very useful because our build is going to be quite focused on crit damage. So overall, I think this is probably the best 5-piece. As mentioned earlier, you could also go Mechanical Acuity if you really just want to go all out damage. But I feel like without rallying, it's going to be very tough to survive in a solo PvP scenario. So that's for the 2 and 5 pieces, and now we'll be left with 4 more slots to use. So instead of running like a generic 4-piece, I think the best way to go with this is to run 1-piece Trainee for the HP and then 3-piece Willpower. You're able to do this because you can use willpower weapons. So I'm using daggers. So now I'll go through the traits. I'm running pretty much all well fitted, except for the reinforced chest. And for the enchantments, I'm running all tri-stat glyphs. For my jewelry, I have 2 infused cost reduction. Now take note that we are going to be stacking quite a bit of sustain on this build. Sustain is how you're going to be surviving this patch. And of course, I don't even have I don't have channel focus skill, so you're going to need even more sustain than usual. So definitely going with cost reduction. Now you can technically also run regen, but they are both about the same, except for the fact that we will also be using mist form, and I'll go through more in depth later. But basically, cost reduction is going to go really well with mist form. And for the last ring, I'm running a swift trait with spell damage. I'll be stacking quite a bit of speed on this as well. Mobility and sustain is how you're going to be surviving on this build. And lastly, for my weapons, I'm running daggers for the crit chance. This build is very crit focused. We have 42% crit and a lot of crit damage. We have Major Force, Khajiit, even the CP passive, Templar passive, so we're going to have a lot of crit. And for the traits, I'm running Main Hand Nunhone, which is what you should always run on a dual wheel, and Charged Offhand. Now, I think Charge is definitely the best offhand for dual wheel on Magplar, and it's going to let us apply status effects a lot more easily. We are running Frost and Shock. Frost will give you 10% more crit damage done to the enemy, and Shock will give you 5% more total damage done. So you want to try to proc those as much as possible, and those are not our only status effects. You're also going to be proccing Sundered from Dawnbreaker, which is 3k pen, and also Overcharged from Jabs, which does damage and also gives minor magicka steal. And very importantly, for our CP, we have Ocular Overload, so this requires you to kill someone with a status effect to proc. So I think that's where Charge also comes in and, as a really useful trait. So that's all for my gear setup, and now I'll be moving on to the skill setup. So for my skills, not much to go through, only 1 bar. I'm running Extended Ritual, Jabs, Mist, Purifying Light, Honor the Dead, and Dawnbreaker. So let's start with Ritual. Now, Ritual is going to be our main heal over time, as weird as this sounds. I mean, we don't really have a lot of other options, but it's a pretty decent heal. I mean, it can crit for like 4k in Cyrodiil. So really strong heal over time, lasts very long, and has a wide AoE radius. So when you're fighting 1vx, you will almost always want to stay in your Ritual as much as possible. If you move to a new location, you should try and redeploy Ritual as soon as possible. And of course, it's always nice to have a purge. I mean, there are a lot of like nasty dots this patch, so having a purge is also really useful. And on top of that, you also have minor mending from this, and you also be able to block more damage and also generate some outs, I believe. So this is a really nice utility slash heal ability. You could also run Channeled Focus for the sustain, but I just personally don't like the fact that the radius is so small. I mean, I think you really need some kind of heal over time to survive, and I think this should be enough. Next up is Jabs. This Jabs will be our main DPS, and also our main, it will be our main DPS. Honestly, not much to say about this skill, except that it also heals you quite a bit. So if you're jabbing a lot of people, it can sort of double as a secondary heal. And you'll be pairing it with Dawnbreaker, so you're going to Dawnbreaker into Jabs. So the next skill is Mist. We are using the speed morph of Mist. And when I first made this build, I started with Race Against Time, but it may look a lot better. I mean, you can sprint in Major Expedition, you get Minor Force, which really benefits our crit build. But I find it a lot easier to survive 1vx with Mist. And honestly, because we are only 1 bar, we don't have like we don't have slots for heal over times like rapid regen and living dark. So the way we are going to heal is not by heal over times but by burst heal. So and I think I think in order to make like builds like this effective, where you rely mainly on burst heal, you need mist. Like, you're not going to be able to like spam your way out of like if you're getting locked down and zerked down, you know, getting piled up upon, I found that just by even roll dodging and spamming Honor the Dead, you're not going to survive. I think you're definitely going to need mist to get out of the way. And you might argue, yeah, why not just use Race Against Time? But I mean, you're just be taking way too much damage. So I experimented around. I found Mist a lot better, and on top of that, Mist also procs the vamp passive for additional 300 damage. So sometimes even when I'm on the offensive, I like to pop in and out of Mist for like an instant, not only to proc the passive but also to remove like any snares on me. So it's a really important set and a really important skill. And honestly, I feel like regardless of what class you are playing, if you are going to go Oakensoul 1 bar, I think Mist is pretty much needed. Like, I don't see how you're going to survive this patch with so much damage without Mist form. So yeah, this is probably one of the more important skills on this bar. Next up is Purifying Light. Now this will be your main, well, not your main, but one of your main bursts alongside Dawnbreaker. And the amount of damage that Purifying Light deals is just ridiculous. Like, I've been getting like 15-20k crits on people, because I mean, Oakensoul just gives you so much damage and it's going to make your Purifying Light hit extremely hard. And on top of that, it also gives like a pretty decent heal over time when you're near the enemy that you applied it on. So actually, not long ago, I had a fight where it was like a 1v2 and I was actually constantly reapplying Purifying on those two guys just to get the heal over time while I wait for my ult to build up for a burst. So you can sort of even use this as a secondary heal. But more importantly, it will be what's proccing your minor sorcery. So no matter what, you're going to have to need, you're going to need to have a Dawn's Wrath skill on your bar. And when I started playing this build, I didn't stop Purifying Light. I had Living Dark, but I found that without Purifying Light, you're just not going to be able to kill like 80% of people in Zero Deal. A lot of cross healing. People are still relatively tanky this patch. You could definitely nuke some like squishy players with just Dawnbreaker and sweeps, but personally, I think you really need Purifying Light to get kills. So that's why I choose to eventually run it over Living Dark. But if you want a more defensive playstyle, you can definitely run Living Dark over Purifying Light. So either way, you will still need one of these abilities. And finally, for the last skill, I'm running Honor the Dead. Now this will be your main heal, and it's going to be carrying most of our healing. Probably like 60% of our healing is going to come from this. And the good thing about this build is that because you have so much crit chance, 42%, you also have a lot of crit healing, Khajiit buffs, crit healing. Honor the Dead is going to be critting a lot and it's going to crit hard. So if you're near a keep, you're probably going to get consistent 15k crit heals. So that's the reason I decided to go dual wheel and sweeps instead of, you know, making a range Magplar with Oakensoul, because I feel like the crit heals are going to be a huge deciding factor on whether I'll survive in a fight or not. So definitely need this skill. And finally, for my ultimate, I'm running Dawnbreaker. Dawnbreaker is your main burst. It's also going to be your only CC. We don't have any other CCs on the buff, but honestly, with Major Heroism, you're going to be able to cast this like every 20 seconds like minimum. So you don't really need to worry a lot about not having a CC on your bar. This will be enough. And it's also really nice because a lot of people are going to be vamps, because Undeath is just so OP. So it's going to hit harder against vamps, and it also applies a nice damage over time, and this can hit really hard as well. Like I've been getting some like 5k damage over time ticks. I found it really good for killing Nightblades because Cloak no longer, I believe Cloak no longer makes you, like you can take dot damage in Cloaks now. I'm pretty sure I've killed some Nightblades while they're in Cloak using the Dawnbreaker dot. And of course it also gives you 3% spell damage, so really nice skill to have overall. And if you are in group, if you are going to PvP in a group, you don't really need Dawnbreaker, I would probably slot Crescents. You can cast Crescent like every 10 seconds with Major Heroism. So, but in a solo scenario, I will use Dawnbreaker. So that's all for my skills. Now I'll be going through some of the other things like my passives. And before I go to that, I should mention that for my armor setup, I'm running 5-1-1. So 1 heavy, 1 medium, and the rest is light. So let's go to the mundus and other passives. And of course the attributes. So for my attributes, I'm running 30 into mag and 34 into HP. Honestly, it's totally up to you how you want to allocate this. I personally find 32k health to be the sweet spot this patch, and honestly you don't really need a lot of magicka, max magicka this patch. 23k, 22k will be enough. And for my mundus, I'm running the Atro. No doubt still the most stat dense mundus out there. You could also try running Thief or Shadow and then run another cost reduction glyph here. Also an option, but I think I would prefer Atro. For my food, I'm running the Smoked Bear Haunch. I think this is still the best food. Gives you HP, stam, and mag recovery. You'll be having a lot of recovery on this build. As you can see with the potion, I have 2.1k mag recovery and 1.4k stam recovery. That's without continuous attack. And of course, we are also a vampire stage 3. You will definitely need her Undeath to survive this patch. And Undeath is one of the strongest passives in the game. Really gives you a lot of resistance. And let's move on to my consumables. So for my potions, I'm just running pretty standard tri-stat potions. You don't need spell power pots anymore. Oakensoul already gives you Major Shock and Major Prophecy, so that's a really good it's especially good for Magplar, because even on a normal Magplar, you have to run spell power pots. Either that or you have to sacrifice like 2 bar space for Degeneration and Camo Hunter. So I think that's what makes Oakensoul really good, especially on Magplar. Magplar and Mag DKs are like the best classes for Oakensoul. And I also have some detect pots. Now I honestly should be making detect pots with like different effects, since I don't really need major sorcery, but these are just what I have left over. So yeah, the pots I would want to have are probably tripods as your main potion, and then you have detects and invis pots if you should ever need to go invis. And lastly, for my race, I'm a Khajiit. Now I think there are a lot of races that will work for this, like High Elf, Breton would all work. But personally, I chose Khajiit because I really like the crit bonus. Gives you 12% crit damage and healing. Really good for our crit focus build. And it also gives you a decent amount of tri-stat for all your stats. And for your, it also gives you some mag and stam recovery. So I think it's a really well-rounded, maybe more offensive focused class, but again, High Elf, Breton, even some of the other like maybe stam classes might work. You just have less magicka, but yeah, race, I don't think race is a very big issue for this build, but Khajiit is probably one of my favorite choices. So I think that's all for the general setup. Now for the last part, I'll move on to the CP. So for my blue CP, I have the following slotted: Duelist Rebuff, Ironclad, Occult Overload, and Fighting Finesse. Let's start with the defense CPs. Again, it's very hard to survive this patch, and at first I tried running with just Duelist Rebuff, but I think I will need Ironclad to survive as well. I mean, people just do so much damage this patch, so I would recommend a minimum of 2 defense CPs, and these two are no doubt the best. Now, this passive is what I want to talk about. Occult Overload, it does pretty much 13k Oblivion damage when you kill someone who's under the effect of a status, so that's why we run Charged. And this is pretty much just, I mean, it's just Vicious Death on steroids. It does 13k Oblivion damage, it's pretty ridiculous. And the way I like to use this is, usually, like, you know, when you're fighting in like when you're fighting against a group, what I like to do is I like to use Purifying Light, try to find the squishiest guy, and then nuke them all on one spot with Dawnbreaker. And as long as the squishy guy dies and procs Occult Overload, you'll usually get like 2 to 3 kills minimum. If you're lucky, you could even wipe like 10 people at once. I mean, this is just a really strong passive. And that's also why we want Charged. I mean, Dawnbreaker and Jabs, we want to try and apply status effects to as many people in the group as possible, not just the person you're focusing. But if you don't want to run this skill, it's perfectly fine. Just swap it out for Master at Arms, so you have 6% more damage. But personally, for 1vx, I feel like I really need Occult Overload if I want to stand a chance of like defeating larger groups. If you're just going to go for like 1v2s or 1v3s, I think Master at Arms will be a better choice. And for the last blue CP, I'm running Fighting Finesse. Good balance between damage and healing. Buffs both your crit damage and healing by 8%. So I like to have this. Gives me both defense and healing. And other than that, just make sure to have all your other non-slotted passives. And for my red CP, I have Pain's Refuge, Sustained by Suffering, Juggernaut, and Celerity. So again, 2 defense CPs here. Really need a lot of defense this patch. Can't stress that enough. Pain's Refuge will always be one of the best outnumbered PvP passives, even if we are using a cleanse, still going to be very strong. And Juggernaut, I feel, is really nice. I mean, it just gives you 5% damage reduction. It wasn't nerfed like Ironclad or Duelist rebuff. So relative to those skills now, the Juggernaut is much stronger than before. I didn't use this before because 5% wasn't a lot back then, but now it is quite a lot. And it's not just against a specific damage type, it's against all damage types, so really nice defense CP to have. Sustained by Suffering, pretty much better version of Rejuvenation, so gives you 150 mag instant recovery, HP recovery as well, while you are under the effects of a negative effect. So pretty much going to be up all the time in a 1vx. And finally, we have Celerity, gives you 10% movement speed. Now, Mist Form itself is a very good skill, but I feel like without at least some additional speed built in, I don't think it will be as effective. So that's why we have Celerity as well as 1 Swift to complement our Mist Form. And of course, you could also always sprint since we are using Well Fitted. So what I like to do is I like to alternate between spending my stam with Roll, Dodge, and Sprint, and spending my mag with Mist Form. I like to alternate between the two. And yeah, that's all for my passives. The green passives don't really matter. It's up to you what you want to run. So that's all for the build, and I hope you guys enjoyed. So I think this this ring is super OP, and you would think that it will probably get nerfed like next week, and it might get nerfed like tomorrow or something, but I doubt they will do it. They will probably want to sell like more copies of the new chapter before they nerf this, so that's why I chose to make this build video. I think this build should last at least a month at least. So again, thanks again for watching. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and you can check out my Twitch for gameplay with this build, and I'll probably also be uploading some 1vx videos in the near future featuring this build. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.